At 6:12 on the morning of my 34th birthday, I found a roll of packing tape on the passenger seat of Adrian's car. It was amber packing tape. A black marker was clipped under the parking brake. On the floor sat 2 paper cups from Lantern Street Coffee. One lid had an A written on it. The other had an M. I stood in the underground garage with a bakery box balanced against my hip and listened to the ventilation fans push cold air through the concrete space. I had gone down to retrieve the candles I had left in my tote the night before. Adrian's car was unlocked because he was carrying bags upstairs after a late grocery run. At least that was what he had told me. The marker rolled when I touched the door. I did not pick it up. Upstairs, Adrian was in the shower. His phone rested on the kitchen counter beside the bowl of lemons. The screen lit while I set down the cake. "Mara, I got the keys. Please don't be late. I can't do this part alone." The preview disappeared after 3 seconds. Mara was his ex-girlfriend. Adrian had dated her for 6 years. He had lived with me for 19 months. Those numbers mattered, because I worked as a production scheduler at a company that made custom lighting fixtures. My days were built from lead times, dependencies, and promises translated into dates. A date was not a feeling. It was a commitment with consequences attached. My birthday had been on our shared calendar for 11 weeks. At 6:20, the shower stopped. I cut the bakery string from the box and placed the small lemon cake in the refrigerator. It had pale yellow icing and 34 tiny sugar pearls around the edge. I had ordered it for 2 people. Adrian came into the kitchen with wet hair and a gray towel around his shoulders. He looked at the clock before he looked at me. He said, "Happy birthday." Then he kissed my temple. I said, "Thank you." He opened the refrigerator, saw the cake, and paused. He had forgotten that I was collecting it that morning, even though I had told him twice. He said he had a problem at work. A delivery had arrived damaged, and he might have to spend most of the day at the warehouse. Adrian managed inventory for a home goods distributor called Northline House. Damaged deliveries did happen. They did not usually require packing tape from Lantern Street Coffee or a second cup marked M. I asked what had been damaged. He rubbed the towel over his hair. He said he did not know yet. His supervisor had only said it was urgent. Then he asked if we could move my birthday dinner to Sunday. It was Friday. We had reservations at the Glass Finch at 7:30. I had bought a dark green dress 3 weeks earlier and hung it inside the wardrobe where he saw it every morning. I had not asked for a party. I had not asked for gifts. I had asked for dinner and the evening walk through Merrow Park, where paper lanterns were displayed along the lake each August. I looked at the damp crescent his towel had left on his shirt. I said, "You already made another plan." His hand stopped. That was the moment he could have told me. The truth was standing between us with very little decoration. He only had to name it. Instead, he said he had no plan. Work was work. At 6:28, I understood that my birthday was not the problem. The problem was that Adrian had decided I could be moved without being consulted. Dinner could move. My disappointment could move. The truth could move. Everything on my side of the calendar was flexible, because he believed I would keep making room. I put 2 slices of bread in the toaster. I said, "All right." Relief changed his face so quickly that I almost looked away. He said he would make it up to me. He would plan something special. He would call as soon as he knew how long the warehouse issue would take. I spread butter on my toast in clean strokes. Then I carried my plate to the small table by the window. Outside, rain had darkened the brick courtyard. A woman in a red coat walked a white dog beneath our balcony. The dog stopped at every drain. Adrian dressed in jeans, a navy sweatshirt, and the old leather boots he wore when lifting heavy things. He did not put on his Northline polo. He filled a water bottle. He took the work gloves from the drawer beside the stove. At 6:47, he left. I watched his car turn right at the end of Briar Lane. Northline's warehouse was left. Adrian and I had met 4 years earlier during a delayed train journey between the fictional towns of Varden and Elmcross. A fallen branch had blocked the tracks. He gave his last packet of crackers to a tired little boy, then carried my suitcase through the rain when the replacement bus arrived. I noticed his quiet reliability before I noticed his face. That was how I loved him too. Not through grand gestures, through repetition. The call at lunch, the spare charger in his car, the 3-hour drive when my father needed cataract surgery. When we moved into Briar Lane, I thought we were building the quiet middle of a life. Mara existed at its edge. She and Adrian had dated for 6 years before separating. After she returned to the area, small requests began. A repair shop number, advice about a landlord, help with a dead car battery. I never asked him to block her. I asked for openness. After she called at 11:40 one winter night, I said I needed him to protect our relationship before I was forced to protect myself inside it. He said Mara was his past, and he was only being decent. I said decency should not require secrecy. He agreed. 3 weeks before my birthday, Adrian began coming home later. Northline was reorganizing 2 storage floors, he said. On a Tuesday, he arrived with dust on his knees and a shallow cut across one knuckle. On Thursday, he took a call on the balcony. The following Monday, I found a folded furniture catalog in his backpack with 3 items circled in blue ink. He said the catalog belonged to a colleague. I did not connect the details because trust is not an investigation, it is a working assumption. It lets ordinary life move without every door needing a lock. Still, I noticed. Scheduling had trained me to notice gaps more than events. A late shipment could be harmless. 3 late shipments from the same supplier meant the stated lead time was false. One unexplained evening meant nothing. A pattern meant the system had changed. On the Wednesday before my birthday, Adrian asked if I cared about our dinner reservation being exactly on Friday. I said I did. He nodded and said he was only checking. On Thursday night, he bought groceries and came home at 10:18. He carried only 1 bag upstairs. I heard the car lock beep from the courtyard 10 minutes later. The tape had stayed on the passenger seat. At 7:15 on my birthday morning, I opened our shared banking app. We kept one joint account for rent, utilities, and household expenses. Our personal accounts were separate. Nothing unusual had left the joint account. I checked the household calendar. Adrian had deleted a block marked tea dinner from Friday evening. The activity log showed it had been removed at 11:06 the previous night. He had not asked me before erasing it. I restored the event, not because I expected him to attend, but because the record mattered. Then I got dressed for work. I wore black trousers, a cream blouse, and the small silver earrings my mother had mailed inside my birthday card. In the elevator, I could smell the lemon icing from the cake box even though it was still in the refrigerator upstairs. The scent seemed to follow me into the lobby. At 8:03, Adrian texted that the damage was worse than expected. He would definitely miss dinner. He added a sad face and promised Sunday. I wrote back, understood. That single word sat on my screen with more truth in it than he knew. My office was on the 2nd floor of a converted textile building in East Bellwether. The production room had long white tables, sample shades hanging from ceiling rails, and the constant dry smell of cardboard. I managed orders from design approval to final shipment. That morning, 38 open projects waited on my dashboard. My colleague Nia had placed a paper crown beside my keyboard. It was made from gold cardstock and held together with 2 staples. There was a blueberry muffin beneath a glass cover. At 8:22, 7 people from my team sang to me near the sample wall. I smiled. I cut the muffin into 8 pieces with a plastic knife. Nobody asked whether Adrian had planned something, because I had already told them about the glass finch. At 9:10, I called the restaurant and canceled the table. The hostess said they could hold it until 5 if I thought plans might change. I said they would not. At 9:24, Mara posted a photograph to a public page she used for her ceramics business. I knew the page because she had once sent Adrian a link to a holiday sale. The photograph showed 6 labeled boxes in an empty room. Sunlight fell across pale wood flooring. In the corner, beside a rolled rug, sat Adrian's black water bottle. The caption said, "New keys, new rooms, new beginning. Grateful for old friends who still show up." I looked at the image for 20 seconds. On the nearest box, Adrian's handwriting said kitchen, fragile. He wrote his K with a short upper arm and a long lower stroke. I had watched that handwriting label our boxes on Briar Lane. My pulse climbed. My fingertips went cold. I placed both hands flat on the desk until the feeling passed. Then I saved the post to a private folder and closed the page. I did not need more evidence. This was not a court. The question was not whether Adrian had committed the most serious possible betrayal. The question was whether I was willing to live with the one he had already chosen. He had looked at my cake. He had kissed my temple. He had invented damaged inventory. Then he had driven across town to carry boxes for the woman he said was safely in his past. At 10:05, I opened the spreadsheet I used for our lease renewal. Our Briar Lane lease ended in 6 weeks. The property manager had offered a new 12-month term with a rent increase of $85. Adrian and I had until Monday to accept. We had discussed signing it that weekend. I stared at the 2 empty signature lines. The renewal had felt automatic 48 hours earlier. That morning, it looked like a dependency that had failed. At 10:17, I made a list. Current lease end date, September 30th. Required notice, 30 days. Joint expenses remaining, electricity, water, internet, final rent payment, furniture ownership, sofa jointly purchased, dining table mine, television his, bed frame jointly purchased, mattress mine, kitchen cart mine. Personal savings available, enough for deposit, first month, moving costs, and 4 months of normal expenses. I did not make the list to avoid feeling. The hurt was there. It sat under my ribs like a hard object. I made the list because pain did not deserve control of the next decision. At 10:41, I emailed the Briar Lane property manager. I said I would not be signing the renewal and asked what paperwork was needed to complete my part of the move-out. At 10:52, I opened a rental site. I had been looking at apartments casually for my younger cousin 2 months earlier, so I knew the general prices. I set my limit at 30% of my monthly take-home pay. I chose 1 bedroom, parking optional, laundry in the building, and a commute under 30 minutes. 17 listings appeared. 1 had been posted that morning. It was in Alder Row, a narrow district built around an old canal spur that had been filled with gardens. The building was called Juniper Court. It had cream brick, dark green doors, and 8 units. Apartment 3B was on the top floor. The photographs showed sloped ceilings, a square kitchen, and a window seat deep enough for books. The rent was $12 less than my half of the Briar Lane apartment. Available immediately. I sent an inquiry at 11:03. At 11:11, the owner replied. Her name was Celia Voss. She could show it at 5:45 that evening because another applicant had canceled. I checked my project board. The Marston Hotel fixture order had cleared inspection early. The only late item was a set of brass rings delayed until Monday. I could leave at 4:30 without creating a problem for anyone. I accepted the viewing. Adrian texted at 12:36. He said the warehouse was loud and his phone battery was low. He hoped I was having a good birthday despite everything. Behind the message, I could picture the empty room from Mara's photograph. I could see his handwriting on her box. I wrote, "I am making the most of it." At lunch, I told Nia that Adrian was helping Mara move and had claimed he was at work. She did not insult him or tell me what to do. She asked what I needed that night. I said, a ride to see an apartment. She nodded once. At 2:08, the Briar Lane property manager sent the move-out form. Both tenants could choose separately whether to renew. If Adrian stayed, he would need to qualify for the apartment alone or add another tenant. My security deposit contribution would be returned after the final inspection, minus any legitimate deductions. I completed my section and saved it. At 3:20, Mara posted a second photograph. This one showed a narrow staircase. Adrian was halfway up it carrying the end of a white bookcase. His face was turned away, but the navy sweatshirt was unmistakable. A man I did not know held the other end. 3 laughing face symbols covered the caption about impossible corners. I did not save that photograph. I already knew enough. At 4:31, I shut down my computer. My team gave me a card, signed in 6 different colors. Nia carried the paper crown to her car so it would not bend in my bag. Rain had stopped. The streets were wet and silver. We drove west through Bellwether, past the old clock factory and the closed flower market. My phone stayed face down in my lap. Juniper Court stood behind a row of plane trees. The front steps were shallow and clean. A brass number 18 was fixed beside the green door. Celia Voss waited under the awning in a rust-colored cardigan, holding a ring of keys and a clipboard. She was in her late 50s, with cropped gray hair and paint on one thumbnail. She said the previous tenant had taken a teaching position in another province and left 2 weeks early. The apartment had been cleaned on Tuesday. We climbed 37 stairs. I counted them without meaning to. Apartment 3B smelled of fresh paint and old wood. Light crossed the small living room. The kitchen had blue-gray cabinets and 1 chipped tile. The bathroom faucet dripped once every 14 seconds. A deep window seat overlooked lavender and raised tomato beds along the canal garden. Celia said heating was included, and the lease was 12 months. She answered my questions directly. When she did not know the water heater's age, she admitted it and wrote herself a note. That small honesty affected me more than the window seat. Nia checked the cupboards, then stood in the bedroom with her arms spread. She said, "This room feels like you, calm, with 1 inconvenient corner." I laughed for the first time that day. 2 other viewings were scheduled for Saturday. Approval normally took 1 business day, but Celia could review my documents that evening if I sent everything before 7 o'clock. I said, "Today is my birthday. I would like to know where I am living before it ends." She handed me the clipboard without asking why. At 6:07, Nia and I sat inside Pine and Parcel, 2 blocks away. On her laptop, I entered 7 years of employment at Lumenfold Works, my income, savings, addresses, and references. For my reason for moving, I typed, "End of current lease." It was accurate. At 6:42, I uploaded my records. At 6:49, I paid the $30 fee. 4 minutes later, I submitted the application. Adrian called at 7:16. That was 14 minutes before our dinner reservation would have started. I stepped outside the cafe. The air smelled of wet pavement and rosemary from a planter near the door. He sounded tired. There was traffic behind him and a hollow echo that suggested a mostly empty room. He said the warehouse problem was finally under control. He was sorry. He asked whether I had ordered food. I looked through the cafe window. Nia was tearing my paper crown open at the staples so it would fit around the small vase on the table. I asked, "Are you at the warehouse now?" There was a pause. He said, "I just left." I asked what street he was on. Another pause. He said he did not know. He was driving. Then a woman's voice came through the phone. It was faint, but clear enough. She asked whether he had seen the screws for the bed frame. Adrian went silent. I felt something inside me settle. Not break, settle. I said. Tell Mara the screws are probably taped inside one of the rails. That is where you put ours. He said my name once. I ended the call. He called back immediately. Then again. On the third attempt, I switched my phone to silent and returned to the table. Nia looked at me. I said, "He knows that I know." She slid the sandwich toward me. I ate half of it while it was still warm. At 7:38, Adrian sent 6 messages. He said it was not what I thought. Mara's movers had canceled. She had nobody else. He had planned to tell me after he fixed the immediate problem. He had lied because he knew I would misunderstand. Nothing romantic had happened. He loved me. He was on his way home. The messages formed a familiar structure. First, minimize the choice, then enlarge the emergency, then make my expected reaction responsible for the lie. I read them once. I wrote, "I will be home later." He asked where I was. I did not answer. At 8:04, Celia called. My application had been approved. My employment and landlord references were confirmed. If I wanted apartment 3B, she could send a digital lease immediately. The deposit was due within 24 hours. The lease could begin the following Monday, giving me 5 weeks of overlap with Briar Lane. I asked her to send it. The email arrived at 8:09. Nia offered to stay while I read the lease. I said yes. I opened the document on her laptop. It was 19 pages. I read every one. Rent due on the 1st, heating included. No smoking. 30-day notice after the initial term. Repairs reported through the tenant portal. 1 parking space available for an additional fee. The apartment could not be sublet without written consent. I initialed 12 places. At 8:47, I reached the signature page. My phone showed 4 missed calls from Adrian and 1 new message. He said, "Please come home so we can talk before you decide what this means." The sentence stayed on the screen. Before you decide what this means. He still believed meaning belonged to him until he explained it. He thought the day was waiting in an unfinished state. He thought I was waiting too. I set the phone beside my cold tea. I signed my full name on the lease at 8:49 p.m. Tessa Elise Rowan. The signature appeared in blue script inside the white box. The system asked me to confirm. I pressed the green button. At 8:50, the completed lease arrived in my inbox. I spent the night Adrian skipped my birthday, signing the lease on my own apartment. There was no dramatic sound, no applause. The cafe dishwasher ran behind the counter. A bus sighed at the curb. Nia folded the paper crown along an old crease and placed it on my head. I transferred the deposit at 8:56. Celia emailed a receipt 3 minutes later. We arranged to meet Monday morning for the keys. I sat back and looked at the photograph of the window seat attached to the listing. The radiator below it had chipped white paint. The cushion was a dull beige. It was not a fantasy. It was a place with a dripping faucet and 37 stairs. It was mine for the next 12 months. Nia asked if I wanted cake. I said yes. We stopped at Briar Lane at 9:31. Adrian's car was in the garage. The packing tape was gone from the passenger seat, but a pale rectangle of adhesive remained on the dashboard where the roll had rested in the sun. Upstairs, every light was on. Adrian stood when I entered. He had changed his sweatshirt, but dust still marked the outer seams of his jeans. The lemon cake sat on the kitchen counter beside 2 plates. He had placed the candles around it in a crooked circle without opening the packet. Nia stayed in the hallway. I took the green dress from the wardrobe, along with clothes for 2 days, my work laptop, medication, toiletries, and the folder containing our lease. I packed them into a small suitcase. Adrian followed me from room to room. He said he could explain. I said, "You already did. You said you were at work." He said Mara had called at 5 that morning. The moving company had canceled after a truck breakdown. Her new lease started that day, and she had to leave her old apartment by noon. She was panicking. He knew how bad the timing looked. He thought he could help for 3 hours, return before dinner, and tell me afterward. I zipped the suitcase. I asked why the tape and coffee were in his car the night before, if she had called at 5 that morning. His face changed. The apartment became very quiet. He admitted she had called Thursday afternoon. He had agreed then. He had bought supplies after work. The moving company's story was true, he said, but the timing had shifted. He did not tell me because he knew I would say no. I said, "You never gave me the chance to say anything." He sat on the edge of the bed. He said, "I was trying to help someone who mattered to me for a long time. That does not mean you matter less." There it was, the emotional center of it. In his mind, care was measured by intention. In mine, it was measured by what he protected when two needs occupied the same hour. Mara needed help moving. I needed him to keep a promise. He chose her, then hid the choice, because he wanted to keep the image of being dependable to both of us. I said, "You made me less important in practice. Then you asked me not to call it that." He put both hands over his face. He said he had made a mistake. He said we could still salvage the evening. He had brought home noodles from the place I liked. We could light the candles. We could talk until we understood each other. I looked at the cake. Condensation had softened the lower edge of the icing. One sugar pearl had slid onto the cardboard base. I said, "I am not spending the rest of my birthday helping you feel better about what you did." He lowered his hands. I told him I was staying with Nia for the weekend. I said I would return Sunday at 10 to discuss the practical details of the apartment. He asked if I was ending the relationship over one missed dinner. I said no. I am ending it over the decision you made before the dinner, the lie you told during it, and the way you are reducing both to a meal. He looked toward the hallway and saw Nia waiting. He did not raise his voice. He did not call me cruel. That almost made it harder. He simply looked stunned, as if he had arrived at a platform 1 minute after the last train and could not understand why the timetable had not waited. He asked me not to make a permanent decision while I was hurt. I lifted the suitcase. I said, "The permanent decision was yours. Mine is the response." Before I left, I cut 2 slices from the cake. I put them into a food container. One was for me, one was for Nia. Adrian watched from the kitchen doorway. I put the remaining cake back in the refrigerator. At 9:58, I walked out of the apartment. Nia carried my work bag. I carried the suitcase and the cake container. The elevator mirror showed the paper crown still on my head. I had forgotten it was there. At Nia's apartment, we sat on her living room floor because her dining table was covered with fabric samples. She gave me a fork. The lemon cake was dense and slightly too sweet. At 10:23, she lit 1 tea candle and pressed it into my slice. She did not sing again. She said, "Make a wish if you want one." I watched the small flame bend toward the open window. I did not wish for Adrian to understand. I did not wish for Mara to disappear. I did not wish for the day to start over. I blew out the candle. Then I slept for 6 hours on Nia's sofa beneath a quilt with blue squares. Saturday morning arrived bright and hot. Adrian had sent a long message at 2:14 a.m. He said moving made Mara anxious and that, during their relationship, he had always handled the practical parts. When she called, he had slipped into an old role. He insisted he did not want her back. I believed him. That did not repair anything. He had protected an old bond by spending trust from the current one. He had decided that lying to me was the cheapest way to pay for being needed by her. At 8:30, I made a 7-day move schedule. Monday, keys and inspection. Tuesday, boxes. Wednesday, books and kitchenware. Saturday, movers. I scheduled 1 hour Sunday to divide our property and settle the remaining 5 weeks at Briar Lane. Then I arranged internet service, ordered 2 towels and 4 plain white plates, and canceled the electricity transfer that would have placed the renewed account in my name. Each action was small. Together they formed a door. Adrian called at noon. I answered. He asked if we could meet that day. I said, Sunday at 10. He said he had barely slept. I said, neither did I. He asked if there was somebody else. The question surprised me until I understood it. He needed a competing explanation for my decisiveness. If I could leave quickly, perhaps I had already been leaving. The idea that one day could reveal a structure I would no longer live inside was harder for him to accept. I said, there is no one else. He asked where I had gone the previous night. I said I had handled my housing. He became quiet. He asked what that meant. I said, it means I signed a lease. For several seconds I heard only his breathing. Then he said, you signed a lease on your birthday. I said yes. He said he thought I had gone to dinner with Nia. I looked at my new confirmation email, the one with apartment 3B written in the subject line. I said, plans changed. It was not punishment. I did not sharpen the words. I repeated the logic he had used when he expected me to remain available after being displaced. He heard it. He said my name, softer this time. I ended the call after confirming Sunday. That afternoon, I told my mother the facts in order. She asked whether I wanted to leave or only wanted the pain to stop. I said, I want to leave. The pain will take its own time. She nodded and brought me 2 cardboard boxes from her hall closet. On Sunday at 9:56, I returned to Briar Lane. The apartment smelled of coffee and the lemon cake. Adrian had cleaned the kitchen. He had also moved the packing tape from his car to the counter, perhaps without noticing the symbolism. We sat at the narrow table by the window. I placed a printed inventory between us. He looked tired. There were shadows beneath his eyes. He had written 4 pages in a notebook. I could see the pressure marks through the paper. He said he wanted to speak first. I agreed. He apologized without excuses for several minutes. He said he had known for 2 weeks that Mara's move might fall on my birthday. He had hoped her arrangements would hold. When they failed, he felt responsible because he had once promised she would never face a move alone after a frightening experience in her 20s. He had not told me about that promise. He said he understood now, that he had been maintaining a private obligation inside our relationship. He said the lie had been cowardly. He offered to stop speaking to Mara. He offered couples counseling. He offered to pay for the unused dinner reservation, even though there was no fee. He was sincere. Sincerity after discovery is still sincerity. It is simply not the same as honesty before it. I listened until he finished. Then I asked one question. I said, if I had not seen the message, when would you have told me? He looked at the notebook. He said he did not know. That answer was the cleanest one he gave me. I slid the property inventory across the table. I said I would take the dining table, kitchen cart, bookshelves, green chair, mattress, 2 lamps, and everything I had owned before we moved in. He could keep the television. I offered him the blue sofa if he paid me half of its current value, or we could sell it and split the proceeds. For the bed frame, I offered the same choice. He stared at the list. He said, you came here to divide furniture. I said, yes. He asked if there was anything he could say that would change my mind. I said no. His eyes filled, but he looked away before any tears fell. I did not enjoy it. I did not feel victorious. I remembered the cold station where he gave his crackers to a child. I remembered him holding my paper cup during my father's surgery. Those things were real. So was Friday. A relationship did not have to be entirely false for me to stop living in it. We worked through the list. He kept the sofa and bed frame. He transferred my share at 10:38. We divided the 4 remaining glasses, 2 each. He chose the ones with straight sides. I chose the heavier ones with small air bubbles in the base. He planned to apply for the Briar Lane lease alone. His salary was likely enough, though the rent would take a larger part of it. If he was not approved, he would move at the end of September too. At 10:52, he asked when I had started looking for another apartment. I said, Friday at 10:52. He looked at the clock on the microwave. He said, while I was with Mara. I said, yes. He pressed his palms against the table. He said he had thought I was at work, waiting for him to call. I said, I was at work. I stopped waiting. We finished at 11:07. Before I left, he asked if we could keep the last month gentle. He said he did not want us to become strangers who hated each other. I told him I would be civil. I would not discuss Mara, monitor him, or revisit Friday every night. I would sleep at Nia's until my mattress moved. After that, I would return only for scheduled packing. He nodded. At the door, he said he wished he had chosen differently. I believed that too. I said, I know. On Monday at 8:15, Celia met me at Juniper Court. She handed me 2 brass keys on a wooden tag stamped 3B. The tag was warm from her palm. We walked through the apartment together. I photographed the chipped tile, the paint marks near the radiator, and a scratch inside the bedroom closet. Celia tested the smoke alarms. She had already repaired the bathroom faucet. At 8:42, she left. I stood alone in the empty living room. Morning light made a long rectangle on the floorboards. I placed my keys in the center of it and took a photograph. Then I sat on the window seat without a cushion. The wood pressed against the backs of my legs. Below, someone had tied blue ribbons to stakes beside the tomato plants. The wind chime made the same 3 low notes. My phone buzzed. Adrian had sent a photograph of the lemon cake box. He asked whether I wanted the rest before he threw it away. I looked at the date printed on the bakery label. The cake was still good for 1 day. I wrote, "Leave it in the refrigerator. I will take it tonight." I did not need to reject every object connected to the birthday. The cake had done nothing wrong. That evening, I packed the kitchen cart. Adrian stayed in the bedroom with the door closed. At 7:20, he came out and placed the bakery box beside my bags. He said Mara had asked why I knew about the screws. I waited. He said he told her we had separated because he lied to me about helping her move. Mara had apologized to him. She said she had assumed I knew. I said, "Did she?" He said yes. Then he added that he believed her. I did too. Mara had posted him publicly. She had not behaved like someone protecting a secret affair. Adrian had created the secrecy alone because he wanted to manage everyone's view of him. That fact removed one kind of uncertainty. It did not alter my decision. I carried the cake and kitchen cart parts to my car. 12 boxes arrived Tuesday. On Wednesday, I packed 73 books and recorded the contents of each box on my phone. Adrian came home to the empty shelves and said the room echoed. I said, "It will until you fill it." On Thursday, I bought an $80 oak desk with a watermark near one corner. It fit beneath the sloped ceiling at Juniper Court. On Friday, 1 week after my birthday, I ate noodles on the window seat because I had no chairs. At 7:30, I remembered the dinner I had canceled. The memory still hurt. It no longer controlled the room. On Saturday at 8, the harbor cart truck parked outside Briar Lane. 2 movers carried everything marked with my green tape. Before they left, Adrian handed me my silver earrings and the spare key to my mother's house, which he had found in a drawer. He asked if he could see the new apartment someday. I said, no. He said, I hope it is good. I said, it is. The move took 2 hours and 18 minutes. At Juniper Court, I opened the box marked kitchen. first and made coffee. My mother, Nia, and Celeste arrived with sandwiches, the repaired paper crown, and a pot of rosemary. We ate at my table on mismatched chairs, then assembled the shelves. No one made a speech. By 4 o'clock, the room looked inhabited. I folded the crown and placed it in the top drawer of the oak desk. At 6:18, Adrian sent one final long message. He said Northline had approved his income for the Briar Lane lease. He would stay. He had begun therapy through his employee plan. He was not telling me to earn another chance. He wanted me to know he finally understood that being needed was not the same as being reliable. I read the message twice. Then I wrote, "I am glad you are taking care of yourself. I wish you well." He responded with the same words. We did not speak again for 3 weeks. I learned the sounds of Juniper Court. The heating pipes tapped at 5:50 each morning. The tenant below practiced clarinet on Tuesdays. I added a rust-colored cushion to the window seat and a warmer bulb to the bedroom. At the end of September, Adrian and I met once for the Briar Lane inspection. There was no damage beyond ordinary wear. At the entrance, he said he was sorry he had turned my birthday into the end of us. I said, "You made a choice that day. So did I." We left in opposite directions. 11 months later, I celebrated my 35th birthday at Juniper Court with 6 people around the oak table. Nia brought a new green paper crown. Celia brought lavender from the garden. At 7:30, we walked along the canal path between lanterns and glass jars. After everyone left, I washed 6 plates. Crumbs remained on the table. Lavender petals had fallen beside the cake stand. I opened the desk drawer and found the old gold paper crown beneath my journals. The clear tape had yellowed along one edge. I placed it beside the new green one. Then I opened the folder where I kept the lease for apartment 3B. The signature page showed the date and time in small gray print. 8:49 p.m., my 34th birthday. I remembered the cold tea, the wet pavement, the green confirmation button. I remembered Adrian carrying someone else's bookcase while I chose 37 stairs, a chipped kitchen tile, and a room he had never entered. The lease had renewed once since then. This time, Celia and I signed at the oak table by the window. I had added a small cat named Mallow to the tenant record. He slept on the rust-colored cushion and left pale fur on everything. I returned the papers to the folder. Outside, the last canal lanterns were being collected. Their lights moved slowly between the tomato stakes. Mallow climbed onto the window seat and pressed one paw against the glass. I sat beside him with the 2 paper crowns in my lap. The brass key to apartment 3B rested on the table, worn smooth around the edge from a year of use.